Hey YouTube, welcome to Lunch Brain. Lunch Brain is the series dedicated to all the awesome ideas we have at work, but struggle to get on paper after work is done. Every week I'm going to film myself doing one of these, and I'll be posting them about my ideas. So let's get into it. Krautrock is a less than flattering name that the British critics gave this rock movement coming out of Germany in the 1960s and 70s. Although a lot of the bands aren't known today, they have been credited for influencing later genres like electronic, glam, punk, garage, grunge, and industrial music. It's very famous for what the British critics called the motoric beat. It's a driving 4/4 beat that is sort of endless and can be accented on the first beat, but is very, very different from what British and Americans bands were doing at the time. Similarly, British and American rock and roll was based around these big bands and legends and that sort of thing, whereas German rockers let the music take the front stage. It was more about the process and the music itself than the people involved. So where British and American rock was tending towards the sort of operatic and over-the-top bombast, German rockers were finding their own way with their own instruments and methods. The context for this is the post-World War II Germany. It was, of course, divided into East and West Germany. And in West Germany, a lot of the people who were part of the Nazi regime were still in charge after the war, because even though it was run by the Allies, you can't keep every doctor and every teacher and so on from practicing because the country wouldn't be able to run. So a lot of those people were quietly put back into the regime. There was this prevailing silence throughout the country about what German culture was, how they'd gotten to the point they had in World War II, and even the roles that were played by those people that were still in charge. In World War II, there was just silence. So a lot of the youth in Germany rebelled against this. They resented the fact that they were cut out of this history, that they couldn't even talk about their own history and culture. So they used Krautrock. Some of them used Krautrock as a way to reconnect to older German values. And it was part of a larger movement to do this, to find their footing after the devastation and horrors of World War II and World War I. Now, the different bands in the Krautrock movement approached the situation in very different ways. For instance, we're going to look at Can, which is my favorite of the movement, and how they went about creating rock and roll that fit the German landscape they found themselves in. Instead of tight little numbers that would go onto the pop charts, they played in long jam sessions, and they would go back to the recordings later on, see what worked, and they would reproduce those for concerts and records. So you would have anything from 4-minute tracks to 15-minute tracks, where you will hear a motif, have it go under the surface, and then reappear much later in the track, and you'll kind of realize when you listen more to it that the motif really never went away. It was ever present. The music of Can is also known for fast changes in tempo, in tone, style, rhythm. So you will be listening to a track, and you will be getting into a groove with where it's heading to, and then it will suddenly change with some dissonant sound or some new movement or instrument. The last thing I want to talk about with Can is their lyrics. The lyrics are mostly in English. They are real words, but they are not supposed to be taken literally, as I understand them. They don't make a whole lot of sense in a literal sense. This isn't songwriting as you were hearing from the Beatles and the Who and bands like that. It was there to serve a different purpose. It was there to bring you into the music, to open up the non-literal part of you, so you can tap into this deeper well of humanity. That's my interpretation. Because I don't believe the lyrics are Dadaist because of that, but I do believe that they are surreal. They're not supposed to be taken as literal. They are supposed to serve the music. That is one thing that a lot of krautrock bands had in common. Everything they did served the music at large. So, and Can is not an exception. So below you will see a link to a Can album that is really good. You should give a listen and look for some of the themes that I talked about here. So my question is, can we connect krautrock music to historic German values? Because as I said before, this is one of the aims of the krautrock genre. British author Warren Ellis gave a speech at the end of Future Everything 2015, a futurism convention. In that speech, he talked about krautrock music. And the beat that we know as motoric, he said, was never called that by the person that invented the beat. That beat was created by the members of Krautrock, which is a very famous krautrock band, maybe one of the most famous. We have quotes from the people in that band saying that it was more about the experience of life itself rather than some mechanistic, cold thing. It was about the flow of life and the continuation of life as a journey, as an adventure. Other members of the band talked about the importance of water and rivers in their thinking when they were creating this music. So if we go back to German epics, the earliest ones we have, we can see the importance of water and rivers in German mythology and in German culture. We can go back to the oldest written epic, the Nibelungenlied, which is set in the 4th century AD. In this epic, the Rhine holds a significance as a source of tribal power for the Nibelungen, which is a tribe that we now call the Burgundians. It is a source of tribal and political power, but it is also a source of spiritual power. There are nixies, which are water spirits, who play a big part in a lot of the oldest German stories, and Germanic stories from other regions as well, such as Norse and Icelandic. It's important to note that in the Nibelungenlied, there are water spirits that speak to the villain at one point to prophesy his downfall. And of course, the villain tries to beat the prophecy, and it doesn't work, but that's how these stories sort of go. So they play a part in the overall fabric of the world, the underlying fabric of the world beyond human understanding and everyday human life. In the 19th century, Wagner would take this story to create the Nibelungenring, or the ring cycle. He wrote an original prelude to the cycle called Das Rheingold, which is all about the Rhine being a source of unbelievable power, enough power to allow someone to control the entire world if only they renounce love, which of course somebody does, and the gold falls to the dwarves, who craft it into a ring of unbelievable power that can control nations. You can see where Tolkien got some of his ideas from German folklore and myth, and he admits this. He draws from these myths very heavily. But in the Nibelungenring, the gold that's taken from the Rhine leads to the downfall of the gods and the end of the world. So you can see how this transformed during this idea of what rivers represent transformed during the rise of German nationalism in the 19th and early 20th century. So it went from this source of mystical tribal power to this nationalist, fascist, jingoist power. And of course, that led to the horrors that we saw in World War II. So we can see that historically, rivers did have power in German culture, both supernatural and political, and tied to identity. So, in conclusion, we can see how this idea of the river has influenced some of the Krautrock musicians, and how it's a return to this older German value of spirituality, of aligning oneself to the supernatural and recognizing that there is more than the here and now. And you can experience that a lot as you listen to Krautrock music. And I have some links below where you can start exploring some Krautrock music, one album from Cannes and some tracks from Krautrock. Krautrock, again, is the ones who created the beat we know as Motorik. And there's a link to the speech by Warren Ellis as well. So thanks for your time. This has been Lunch Brain, and I will see you later.